Hey guys, it's Miss Clyber here. We're going to talk about Chapter 1, Section 3, Drifting Continents. Let me pull this up, sorry. So you should have it titled Chapter 1, Plate Tectonics, Section 3, Drifting Continents at the top of your paper, so you know that you're in Section 3 now. So we're going to talk about how Alfred Wegener came up with this theory called continental drift. He is the one that hypothesized that the continents were actually one solid piece called Pangaea. And over time, he believed that the continents separated to the positions that they are in now. So he came up with that theory, continental drift. All the continents, that supercontinent, is known as Pangaea. Over 10 million years ago, Pangaea, he believed, broke apart. The pieces slowly moved to present-day locations. Now, Wegener gathered evidence from the scientific fields to support his idea on continental drift. He used evidence from fossils, evidence from climate changes, and evidence from land features. If you put the pieces of the puzzle, the continents, back together, you can kind of see where he's coming from on some of his theories here. Wegener pieced together maps of Africa and South America. What he noticed is the mountain ranges on both continents lined up. He also was noticing that coal mines matched up with coal mines in North America. So these huge land features that we have on different continents, if you piece them together, they actually match up, and he believed were one actual solid land formation. Wegener used evidence from fossils. He used fossils to support his argument for continental drift. He found traces of fossils on different continents that these organisms would have no means of traveling and spreading if they weren't on one cohesive piece. So for example, on the Mesosaurus worksheet you guys have, the Mesosaurus is a alligator-like species. It likes fresh water, from what evidence they found. It also can't swim long distances. It needs to rest on land. So the fact that they found fossil pieces of this organism in South America and Africa doesn't fit. That organism would swim that far from continent to continent. The only rational theory is that the organism lived on that continent and the continent slowly broke apart and they weren't swimming back and forth. When the continent separated and divided, the organisms on that half of the continent got pushed to South America. The other organisms that are on the African side got stuck in Africa. So he used these fossils to support it. He also used plants, this fern-like plant that was found on different continents throughout the world, and plants don't get up and walk. So for these plants to be on isolated islands such as Australia, Australia had to have been part of connected to the rest of the continents, because Australia has organisms that become isolated because they can't travel outside of the ocean. Okay, the ocean keeps them that barrier. So their dispersal is limited. So somehow they got to these other continents. Something had to move them there. So the evidence from fossils is one of the pieces that he used to support his theory. He used climate. So he looked at some of these organisms where they lived and typical, features that an organism have in order to live in an area. So you look at adaptations there. And organisms that were found to live in tropical-like climate, those fossils are being found on really cold continents, and vice versa. Organisms that need fur and need to be, protecting themselves from cold climate are being found in tropical areas present day. And so he used the fact that, as these continents moved and shift, so did their climate. So there's deep scratches in rocks that showed that the continental glaciers once covered South Africa. So these fossils that, would prove that these organisms would have to have warmer fur and things like that in order to survive. Tropical plants have been found on continents that have no tropical plants or climate. So it's not possible for these tropical organisms to thrive in an area that's not tropical. So Wegener concluded that when Pangaea existed, South Africa was much closer to the South Pole. All this information and evidence helps him to support his idea on continental drift. So his hypothesis was actually rejected by a lot of scientists. Why was it rejected? Well, he couldn't explain the forces that pushed or pulled the continents. That's the piece of the puzzle that was missing. What would cause these continents to move and be pushed and pulled? He didn't have enough information to support his theories, so he couldn't identify the cause of continental drift, so geologists rejected his idea. Concept makes sense. Evidence from landforms, evidence from the climate, and the fossils. It all makes sense. But what force? He had to have that piece is what caused geologists not to believe him. Geologists thought that mountains formed from Earth slowly shrinking and cooling. So at the time, they thought that the Earth would shrink and cool, and as this happened, it caused those mountains to form, versus the continental plates pushing into each other, crashing and causing the mountains to form, as we have hypothesized and theorized as of today. He also proposed that when continents collided, their edges crumbled and folded. So he didn't have enough evidence to support his idea. He had a really good idea and theory going that scientists have now further investigated and have been able to help Wegener support with some of their evidence from the research they've done. Now that we know about plate tectonics, and that's what's pushing and pulling our continents, Wegener's theory can be supported a lot better than what it was before. So if you have any questions about continental drift, please come see me. Talk to you later. Bye, bye.